Excited.
So we are joined all the way from Baltimore, Maryland, on the campus of Morgan State University by Gabrielle Hall, founder of Grain of Arcane. We thank you so much for being our first guest of 2025. We thank you so much for taking some time out of your day for us. I got a room full here with me at Velma Jackson High School. We're recording this for all of our friends in Madison County Schools, Madison Central High School, Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, the Academic Options Center, and our YouTube channel for our entrepreneurship class. So thank you so much again for taking some time for us today.
Of course, and thank you again for having me. I'm really excited to be here, really excited to share some knowledge with the students and hopefully learn more about them as well.
That's awesome. Now, just give us a little background. You are from Baltimore, and even though you went to Morgan State, you were at a community college, but you were always involved in entrepreneurial things, starting at just 15 years old. So, just give us a little background of you and how Grain of Arcane came to be now, 7 years later.
Yeah, sure. So I am from Maryland. I'm a PG County native, which is about 30 minutes from Washington, D.C. Um, I actually grew up around parents that actually were entrepreneurs, which I think inspired me to kind of take on my own venture. Both of my parents started out as professional chefs. My dad ended up branching out with his own catering business. So I kind of got my first job at like the age of like 7, kind of helping him with the day to day with his business. Um, I was always an artist, so that kind of had me. I started out as a hobby, right? So I just started out creating. Art was kind of an outlet for me. I was dealing with mental health challenges at a young age. I grew up in a split family, so identity crisis, trying to figure out my way of life, and art just kind of became my outlet of expression. And from there, I think that I just realized the impact that art and creativity had on people, and that kind of inspired me to, scale it up and turn it into a business. So, and that's what brings me to where I am now. Um, I was a high school student at Bowie High School. So, for people who aren't in the DMV area, Prince George's County is actually one of the richest Black counties in Maryland. Also, one of the richest Black counties in the world.
Yep.
Um, and so, going to school in Bowie was definitely an experience because in my younger years, I actually uh, spent a lot of time in Crofton, which is a predominantly white area. So it was kind of like a culture shock there, just in terms of, adjusting to different environments. And, of course, still with my upbringing, trying to figure out where I was between there. So, yeah.
Now, obviously, growing up Prince George County, you made the decision to go to community college before you went to the great Morgan State University. So, well, I have a lot of seniors in here, and a lot of them are kind of starting to make decisions about that. So, why did you go to the community college before you went to Morgan State?
So, Prince George's Community College actually had a program for high schoolers who were finishing, that year and kind of going into college right after that. And so they had this program which was called the Promise Scholars Program. You
Oh,
can look it
cool.
up; it still exists. And so, basically, what the Promise Scholars Program was they would provide free tuition. It was basically a full ride and books covered, for any students
Oh, wow.
coming straight out of high school. Um, I know they had it in Prince George's County, but I think that it was something that they also did just in the state of Maryland as a whole. If your school was partnered or qualified with that. Um, I actually had originally wanted to go straight to a 4-year college, but with my dad being disabled, it was a big financial obligation that we just didn't have at the time. So I kind of had to go with where the money was. So
Yep.
that allowed me to go to school tuition free for 2 years. And they actually have a program with Morgan State, which I didn't know until going there. So, usually what community colleges will do is, depending on what kind of college you're trying to go to, especially if it's in your area, they'll usually, transfer almost all the credits or pair you up with a representative from that college so that you kind of know what the requirements are going to be when you transfer and go into that 4 year program.
Absolutely. And for those who don't know, and I know this is SWAC country down here, but Morgan State's part of the MEAC. Great HBCU there in Baltimore. But something you've done while you were at community college and now you're still doing at Morgan State is even as a student, you're very involved with entrepreneurial student organizations. So for the students that want to go to college and they have entrepreneurial ideas, why is it important to get involved in these entrepreneurial student organizations while they're at college?
Yeah. Well, number one, I would say experience. I feel like, taking advantage of the networking opportunities in college is honestly one of the hugest benefits of college. There's so many people in one area, from all different areas of life. You have people from Maryland, people from New York, Alabama, Philly. It's a whole Chipotle bowl of cultures and experiences. And I feel like there's no better place or opportunity to network your business and test your business other than being at your university. Morgan State in particular is actually the best business school in Maryland. They also have the third best HBCU business program, which was also recently ranked on Bloomberg. So they have a lot of connections there. Um, we actually have what is called the Entrepreneurship Development and Career Center, where they specifically support students that have businesses. So Morgan State also allowed me to get non-dilutive funding for my business, which just
Wow.
means that I can get funded for my business without having to give any equity or control of my business to other people. So I actually started out a couple years ago. think this was within my I think this was in my first year transferring from Morgan. I got my first grant. It was $10,000. So that was, a huge leap to allow me to kind of build my business without having to use my own money. Before coming to Morgan State, I didn't know anything about grants, right? And so these programs and just the knowledge that I gained at Morgan State helped me to be able to learn more ways that I can support my business, and also provided me with connections, directly to alumni and local organizations that were willing to support my business as well. So that kind of helped me take over there. Um, which led to me, going from my first pitch competition to now winning over 7 pitch competitions,
Wow.
all with the help of Morgan State and, of course, my advisors. So definitely very helpful. Um, Before I transferred to Morgan State, I was a part of this club at Prince George's Community College called the Entrepreneurs Club. But when I attended Prince George's County, it was during COVID. So the club was just created, and I think that we kept it active for about a year. But it was kind of hard to be involved, with COVID and just staying at home and everything. So I didn't really get the experience or the exposure until I transferred to Morgan State. And that kind of just allowed me to take over my business from there.
That's awesome. Now, something you mentioned about pitch competitions, and this group in here, I think, does a great job. But kids want to get so upset and just act like it's so hard to be able to speak and to sell and to market themselves. And I think even if you're never going to be an entrepreneur, that's a skill that is so underlooked and undervalued in our country. But especially if you want to be an entrepreneur of any sort, why is it so important to have those communication and pitch sales skills in order to set yourself apart and gain that competitive advantage? In the world of of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, great question, by the way. Um, so I want to start by actually saying that one thing that actually helped me gain my confidence to be able to speak and articulate myself better with people was while I was in high school, I took a dual enrollment class at Bowie State University, which was ironically public speaking. And, it's kind of crazy being in high school. I was top of the class, but um, being in that class really allowed me to gain confidence in just talking to people, researching. Um, and I think that the biggest thing that I learned from the class and just in my experience and speaking in general, is that it's really just having a conversation, right? And a lot of us, we have friends, we have family, we carry conversations with people all the time. And I think that it's really just reassuring yourself that it really is just a conversation, because if you can't talk to people about what you do or what you stand for, then ultimately why would they want to support you, right? Especially when we're thinking about acquiring funding, getting money, right? People don't just hand you the money because you're saying you have a business. They're handing you the money because they resonate or admire what you stand for and what your business is doing. And I think that it really just boils down to figuring out how to convey that story, especially if you have a personal attachment to your business. So, for example, for me, with my business, it started out from my mental health struggles, right? And all of us have emotions. So when you start talking about mental health and what that looks like for you, a lot of people get that light bulb and they're like, "Hey, I go through this too. I understand this. Wow, I thought I was the only one." And it kind of just takes off from there. Um, so yeah, it's really important to really just understand your worth and what you're doing, because once you understand your worth and you believe in yourself, then you can articulate that in a way for other people to value you, what you do, and just continue to build on that dream.
Yeah, and because people aren't just going to find you. I had another guest one time that talked about she was at a event where authors were pitching their books they had written, and some of these people had spent years and tons of money and time writing this book, and they were just sitting behind the table, not pushing it to anybody. And then they were complaining about how no publishers would pick them up, and I'm like, at some point you've got to take initiative to get yourself out there to help, to put it in front of people, and that's why it's so important to have those skills.
No, I definitely agree. Even just piggybacking off of what you said, I think that it's not only being able to communicate and articulate yourself, but also I have this saying that I call it, which is the art of networking, which really just means being present. A lot of times, the connections that you're seeking don't come from posting online and sending DMs to people. It literally comes from being in person with these people. Um, even in my experience, right? I've gone to events. I've met Tabitha Brown, right? This is
Oh
like the
wow.
biggest influencer in the world right now.
Yeah.
Um, and I met Tabitha Brown through um, attending the National Sales Network, right? And for me, this was a dream for me because I admire Tabitha, what she stands for and all of that. And when I saw her on the lineup, I was like, I don't know how, but I know that I'm going to get to talk to her while I'm here. And that was exactly what I did. Um, I don't know if any of the students in the class are familiar with Shark Tank, but Shark Tank is, a TV show where entrepreneurs get to pitch their business for, I think, about like $1 million or so, and their business kind of takes off on the market from there. Um, I've had the experience of attending a couple events in the area where I've even been able to network and receive training from several people from Shark Tank. So um, I had attended the HBC Universe Summit that they did in Morgan State last year, and this was their first time putting it on, right? So while I'm there, I ended up running into the recruiter from Shark Tank. And I
Wow.
was like, this is so crazy because a lot of times you don't realize who is in the room until you have a conversation with them, which is also where that talking point comes to play. Because at the end of the day, you may know who they are, but they don't know who you are.
There
And
you go.
sometimes you're just a conversation away from getting that funding that you need or meeting that celebrity that you want to meet. And it's just so important to just articulate yourself and break out of your shell, right? Even me, like I said, I've won over 7 pitch competitions, but every time I do one, I get nervous. Every time I do one, right? Because that's only normal. It's if it comes that easy to you to where you don't get your butterflies and all that type of stuff, then are you really going as hard as you should? Um, so yeah.
That's awesome. Now, tell us about Grain of Arcane, because we have looked at your website and it's just incredible all the different types of things but it all has the same. It's different items, but they all have the same theme, which is self care. So tell us a little bit about all the things you sell and how it all ties together to the self care of the whole person.
Yeah, yeah. So my business, just for those who haven't seen my business, I have an e-commerce retail store that utilizes visual art, fashion, and self-care to promote mental wellness and empower underserved communities. Essentially, what that means is just that my business takes art, fashion, and self-care products to really just get people, one, starting conversations through the products that I sell, right? So a lot of the products that I sell are very relatable to my audience, which is, typically people who are struggling, with their mental health or actively working on their mental health and trying to find, different things to implement in their lives. Um, like I was saying, when I started out, before it became a business, art was a hobby for me that was an outlet of expression. Fashion kind of goes hand in hand with that because I used to design clothes a lot, and so I used to put these messages on clothing because art can be wearable. And what better way to convey a message than what you're wearing, right? Somebody's going to notice what brand you have on, or if their favorite celebrity is wearing that shirt rather than, you know, something that's written down on paper. And so I really think that for me, it was just trying to find a creative and fun way to convey that message. When it comes to the self care aspect, um, a lot of times, when we think about what self care and taking care of ourselves looks like, right? It comes to hygiene. For females, go and get your nails done. For the guys, go and get a fresh haircut, go on to get a fresh groom. Um, and so I think for me, it was really just, well, how can I combine all of these different aspects that we incorporate into our lives to, just take care of ourselves and increase our mental health other than, Grain of Arcane. Um, and so from creating my products, and it ended up kind of me um, really starting to offer more services. So outside of my products, I also do a lot of workshops, bringing these environments to people, right? Because not everybody has access to these things in their neighborhoods and in their communities. And it becomes a point in time where you have to say, okay, you know what, I know that they don't have this, I'm going to bring it to them. And so that's really kind of where I'm at with my business now. Doing workshops for different schools, different organizations, a lot of partnerships. um, I actually host a annual mental health fundraiser every year, and
Wow,
so what that looks like, it's a different theme every year. But I actually started out by donating to the National Alliance on Mental Illnesses, which is the biggest national organization dedicated to mental illnesses. And so with that, that looked like, each year was something different. First year, I had a pop up shop, right? So it was, providing a platform for entrepreneurs while highlighting, the hardships of maintaining mental health, just, as an entrepreneur. And it kind of branched out to that, to doing speaking engagements, right? So, like last year, I actually hosted the Emmy Award winner, Kondwani Fidel, who is also the current partner of the Orioles. And so he came and did some spoken word for my event, and we just had an open discussion. Nami ironically ended up being one of the sponsors this year instead of me donating to them, so they were able to provide mental health resources, where to go in the city, all that type of stuff. So it's truly become like a full blown out thing now, that all started from my own hardships. So yeah.
that's awesome. And we'll definitely get that IG handle for that before we go. But the last thing I want to talk about before I get to their questions is one of the overriding themes of your business is the mental well-being and mental health issues. And everybody in this class has come up with their own business concepts. And I thought it was interesting that several of them kind of had things geared toward mental health uh, of their customer in different ways. And I know for decades we heard about the stigma of mental health issues in the Black community, but that has changed. The world is changing, stigmas are dropping, and resources and access has changed. I mean, now you have people you can meet with online. Every college campus, all the cuts in colleges, but one thing they have invested money in is mental health care for students. So, especially these kids that are going to be entrepreneurs, everybody's going to deal with mental health issues. But what are some ways that these kids can prepare themselves for when they face these mental health crises as a young adult?
Yeah. I think that one thing is outside of everything, being honest with yourself. Um, I think that once you're honest with yourself about what your needs and wants are, you're kind of able to navigate it better. Um, Psyching yourself out of what you're actually going through is not really the most conducive because, it sounds great in the beginning, but then when it comes crashing down, it's like, when I've hit rock bottom, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. Some ways that looks like for me is um, I like to take nature walks, right? Nature makes me happy. So every day I try to walk outside at least 2 times a day. When it's a sunny day, I try to walk outside, even more because the sun makes me happy. Um, Time management, right? So not stressing yourself out to the point to where you can't manage the things going on because you're going to get anxious, right? You're going to get overwhelmed and eventually you're going to experience burnout, which is just going to ultimately not be able to help you do anything. Um, Figuring out, different resources that are by you. So, even as a college student, we get, like you were saying before, we get free therapy sessions, right, that are covered by our school. So even, as you get into college and you're navigating through the hardships of that, in addition to being an entrepreneur, you can seek the resources that are right at your school for free while you're going there. Um, there's really so many different ways to really deal with mental health now. Um, it's so funny because you were talking earlier about the stigma, and a lot of people don't know that 63% of African Americans believe that mental health is a sign of weakness, which is more than half of the population of African Americans. Yet, systemically, we are suffering more from mental illnesses because we don't have the resources to help us navigate these challenges. Um, yeah, I really just think that, doing your research, seeing what you have available, sometimes it's just simple as having a conversation with your friend, and you realize talking to your friend, you both are going through it, right? And at the end of the conversation, you both uplift each other. There's so many different ways to really deal with it. But I think that honestly, giving yourself grace, allowing yourself to go through, these motions, right? Because the reality is that um, normal is not a thing, right? Regardless of what you're doing or who you are, everybody will experience some type of mental health challenge. Everybody experiences sadness. Everybody experiences depression. It looks many different ways for different people. But really, just also understanding outside of all of these things that it's okay to not be okay, right? But when you realize that you're not okay, especially if it's for a long time, then you have to be realistic and say, you know what? I might need some extra assistance.
Absolutely. Well, I want to get to as many of these questions as I can. I like this first one. This is Jaden Latiker. He's a senior, and he asked, "Did people ever doubt you when you started business at such a young age? And how long did it take you to start your business?"
That is a great one. So, short answer, yes. People did doubt me. They still do. Um, I started my business actually, I think it was junior year of high school. And mind you, at this time, I didn't have any grants or any funding or anything like that, right? So I took every paycheck that I got and I put it into my business. Um, and, starting a business in high school, it was a lot. You have a lot of people who don't support you, you have a lot of people who don't have the money to support you. But I really think that ultimately, regardless of how other people feel about your business, it's really just about you taking the initiative and not allowing what other people say to tear you down for what your dreams and goals are. It's kind of like being a parent, right? Your business is your baby, literally. You built this from the ground up. people can't tell you about your kid. And if they do, it's like, okay, well, you didn't raise this kid, you don't know how they are. You kind of just got to do your own thing from there. Repeat the second part of the question.
How long did it take to start your business?
How long did it take? Okay. So when I started my business, I was 15 years old. I'm now 23 as of last week. So to put that into perspective, it's been a little over 7 years. When I started my business in high school, I didn't have, LLC or anything like that. It was literally just the thought and the action. I actually didn't get my LLC until August 2023 of last year, where I rebranded my business from, that original idea I had, and then kind of pivoted from there. So, yeah.
I like this one. This is Destiny Smith. She's a senior, and she asked, "How have you dealt with the struggles, and what have you learned most from them?"
Good one. I think that in terms of dealing with my struggles, one of the number one struggles with being an entrepreneur is obviously the financial obligation. One way I've been able to kind of overcome that is, of course, applying for the grants, seeking investors, making connections with people who are interested in, funding my business. Um, in terms of how I've been able to, just continue to deal with that, going to these networking events, making connections, telling people what my business does. In terms of the um, representation of my business, when it comes to staff, people knowing all that types of stuff, just ask your friends. If your friends support you, they'll be willing to help you in the beginning. Now, eventually people will want to be paid, but when you're starting out, you don't have to have everything all together right then. Um, when I started out, I had my friends, help me as brand ambassadors. Some were helping me as assistants, helping coordinate events, all that type of stuff. So yeah, you just got to get creative sometimes.
That's awesome. I got time for one more. This is Terry Thompson. That's another senior. I got a lot of seniors in here, and he asked, even though you knew you wanted to start a business, what was it that made you want to sell what you sell?
That's a good question. So actually, what made me just decide to start my business period was I had the idea, and my father and I were actually on the way to the grocery store, and he randomly goes, "What happened to that business idea that you were talking about? You make all these things, you talk about it. Why don't you do it?" And I said, "You know what? You're right. Why don't I do it?" And so that's kind of what made me decide to start the business. In terms of selling the products, um, like I said, it kind of started as a hobby, me just creating things that I wanted to create. But after doing customer discovery, learning more about what my customers' needs and wants are, that kind of allowed me to be able to figure out what they really need. Because as you're continuing to scale your business and you're thinking about sustainability, how long will your business last? You have to think about, well, what do your customers really want? What are they
There you
actually
go.
going to buy?
There you
How are they
go.
going to continue to support you? And that's kind of where the customer discovery, doing interviews, Instagram polls, all that type of stuff, that stuff is really vital.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that. And we're almost out of time, but I think that I'm so glad you mentioned that because so many young entrepreneurs they they just focus on what they like. They don't focus on what the people that they're going to try to sell to like. And that is such a common mistake. And I'm glad you mentioned that because you have to see, I may not like this, but if somebody else is going to pay a lot of money for it, I need to sell it. And that sounds simple, but that is such a big concept. And I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Now we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for taking some time for us today. But a couple things before we go, your website and on Instagram, Grain of Arcane on Instagram, one word, shows all your products, shows all the things you got going on.
Yes. Uh-huh. So the Instagram and the website are the same. If you go to my Instagram page, which is Grain of Arcane, and you go in the bio, it'll also take you to all my links. So just for the students in the class, If you guys are interested in shopping as well, if you guys go to my bio and sign up, you'll get 10% off your first purchase. So
Awesome.
definitely, embark on that too.
Awesome. Now, the last thing before we go, obviously, we have a multitude of business concepts in here. Some want to be side hustles, some want to be full-time entrepreneurs, and that's great. Thinking like an entrepreneur can always be beneficial. But what are some things that these kids need to be ready for as they get ready to transition out of high school and become young business leaders?
Yeah. So a couple of things that I would leave you guys with is definitely your communication skills, right? If you're, a quiet person, you don't like to talk to people like that, unfortunately, you're going to have to break out of your shell. So, maybe already starting to get into some communication classes, over the summer, looking into any entrepreneurship classes during the summer. Um, Trying different business ideas, figuring out what works, maybe getting a job so that when you do graduate college, you kind of have that money to sustain your business until you get the grants. A lot of our laws are changing, in the world right now. And so when it comes to DEI, which is diversity, uh, um, equity and inclusion, equality and inclusion, sorry. Um, and you're thinking about who you are as a person and what your business stands for, really thinking about how you're going to make your business stand out regardless of your cultural background or your ethnic background, right? Because the reality is that with the landscape changing, they don't care whether you're a woman-owned business, they don't care whether you're LGBTQ business. Outside of that, how can you make yourself stand out? What are you willing to offer, and how far are you willing to go to make sure that your business can flourish?
Absolutely. Well, that is some good stuff, and I'm glad you're saying the same things I say because I think it's more believable when somebody else says it. So, Gabrielle Hall, all the way from Baltimore, Maryland, on the beautiful campus of Morgan State University. We thank you so much again for joining us today.
Thank you again for having me, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Talk to you soon, buddy.
All right, have a good one.
See you.